Ever since I watched Breaking Bad last year, I couldn't help myself but compare it to GTA 5. And I had this video planned for almost a year, but I never knew what to do with it. Now that I know, let's get on with it. The video will mainly focus on main characters of both Breaking Bad and GTA 5, and the similarities and differences between them and their relationship throughout the two stories. Let's first take a look at the characters individually, starting with Michael DeSanta and of course Walter White. When we first meet Walt, he is a man past his prime who just turned 50. He's essentially dissatisfied with his life, he's an underachiever. Unlike Michael, however, Walt does not have the years of criminal ventures behind him. Nonetheless, they are in a similar position, as just like Walt, Michael is at the beginning of the game leading a boring life. Sure, he lives in a mansion and has a lot more luxuries than Walt, but at their essence, both of them lived very boring, unfulfilling lives without any excitement to them. They're also of similar age, with Michael being either 45 or 48 and Walt being 50 when we first meet them. And yes, the circumstances are indeed different at first, as Walt feels like he has to go into selling meth to help his family, unlike Michael, who just straight up missed the life of crime. But what they have in common is that they're addicted to the thrill and the adrenaline. For them, it's something exciting. And there are two parts that I will now compare. Here's what Michael says to Franklin after they pull Martin Madrazo's house down.
Oh man, I'm fucking excellent. My heart ain't pumped like that in years. Oh, yes. Fucking A, Bubba!
And here is Walter White, right after he just got his money from Tuco Salamanca and blew up his hideout. This confirms what I said about both of them being clearly addicted to this lifestyle, whether it be a completely new one for Walt or going back to an old one for Michael. So to sum up, Michael DeSanta and Walter White, while the circumstances of them turning to crime were different, it's clearly shown that both are addicted to that life, and that the reason of them turning to that life is unfulfillment with their everyday lives up to that point. Looking at their morals, there are also some parallels that can be drawn there too, as both of them aren't by any means fans of unnecessary killing. However, if they absolutely have to, they'll do it, especially when looking at Walt in the later seasons. For example, when he ran over those thugs to save Jesse, he didn't really want to kill them, but he did it, literally just to save Jesse. And for Michael, it's not like he wanted to kill Trevor when he made that deal with Dave before the prologue, but he felt like he had no choice and that he had to do it just to protect himself and his family. Now let's take a look at their guilt, if you could call it that. And this is an area where the two are really different. Both characters show not that much guilt about what they did. Sure, Walt does show guilt right after killing Crazy 8, but all of the other things that he did, he doesn't really seem to be fazed by that much. And not to mention all the lives he's destroyed simply by making and distributing this horrible substance. And Michael, in my opinion, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I think he does show maybe a bit more guilt than Walter, and maybe a bit more regret for the things he's done. Trevor says this about Michael in this scene:
just because I like the life and you feel guilty about it doesn't make you more of a man than me.
So by this, we do know that Michael is at least to some degree guilty about the things he does, and Walt, well, as the show progresses, he seems to give less of a shit. And while Michael sometimes even has nightmares and hates himself, Walt seems to be perfectly fine for the most part, and he even mentions to Hank that ever since he got his diagnosis, essentially ever since he became a criminal, that he sleeps just fine. In the series finale, he says that he liked what he did. It made him feel alive, which cannot be said about Michael. I mean, it can to an extent, but like I said, he does hate himself to some degree, unlike Walter. Even at the very end of the game, when he seems like he's finally done with the crime and starts working at the movie studio, there's still some dose of self-hatred for the things he's done, unlike Walter, when at the end he just admits straight up, like, it just made me feel alive, I was good at it, all that. But before we continue this video, I want to ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, as we are trying to get to 1,500 subscribers by the end of this year, so let's go ahead and make that happen. Enough about Michael and Walt for now. Let's compare their two partners and prodigies, Jesse Pinkman and Franklin Clinton. Starting with Jesse, who starts as, on the surface, a loser, small-time dealer who is just in it for the money without much thought about what he's doing and how that's affecting others. But as the show goes on, we start to see more and more that Jesse is is not meant for this life, unlike Walt, who fits right in. Both characters are young adults trying to make it through life, with Franklin being 25 during GTA 5's events and Jesse being 24 when Breaking Bad starts. When they team up with their older partners, they are both in pretty shitty situations. Jesse just lost his partner and his lab, and Franklin lost his job. And while Franklin is not blackmailed like Jesse, they both start an unlikely partnership, and as the show and the game progress, we see a really big similarity between the two characters, and that is loyalty. Jesse, while constantly screwing up, he is still completely loyal to Walt for a majority of the show. This is especially shown in season 4 when Jesse goes through with killing Gale to save Walt's ass, and when Gus is planning to replace Walt with Jesse. Gus wants to kill Walt, seeing him as a loose end, but Jesse's loyalty for Walt is ultimately what saved Walt from Gus, as Jesse, despite how messed up their relationship was by this point, refused to let Gus get rid of Walter. And comparing this to GTA 5, Franklin demonstrates the same loyalty towards Michael, and just like Walt and Jesse, Michael and Franklin have been through a lot of shit together. When Devin Weston came to Franklin's house to ask him to kill Michael, Franklin, still knowing the risk, stayed on Michael's side and again demonstrated a similar loyalty to Jesse's towards his partner. However, these two characters are also in many areas and ways different. While both show loyalty to their friends, unlike Jesse, Franklin seems to be more fit for the criminal lifestyle. But we do know that Franklin is not a fan of killing people either, but he's in general nowhere near as affected by the things he did. Unlike Jesse, that's not to say Franklin's really heartless and that he actually enjoys the life. We know that at the beginning of the game, he does try to work a more legitimate job, and even in GTA Online, he is more or less legit and is a family man, showing that he, just like Jesse in El Camino, did for the most part end his criminal lifestyle. But in general, I do think that while Franklin, just like Jesse, didn't enjoy the things he did, he was a lot more fit for that life than Jesse was. Finally, let's look at their relationships. Between Michael and Franklin and Walt and Jesse, there is some sort of father-son or a mentor-student dynamic. However, in GTA 5, that dynamic and the overall relationship is far less toxic and more healthy and with less manipulation. And as we can see, Michael does care a lot more about Franklin than Walt does about Jesse, and between Michael and Franklin, there seems to be no manipulation on either side. Unlike Breaking Bad, where ever since pretty much the end of season 2, Walt manipulates Jesse, he's responsible for Jane's death, and he's done so many bad things to this kid, unlike Michael and Franklin, which you never see that kind of stuff between those two. And while there are some hints that Walt actually does care about Jesse, all of that is buried under messed up manipulation, among other things Walt is responsible for. Unlike Jesse, Franklin at the end is not mentally destroyed by his partnership with Michael, and in the very end, when for Jesse it feels like he's finally free from Mr. White, for Franklin it feels like he actually made a genuine friend for life who, while sometimes selfish, still looked out for Franklin and helped him out in many ways, leaving me to conclude that Michael and Franklin's relationship seemed a lot more like a healthy, genuine friendship. And with that said, I want to thank you for watching this video. Leave a like on it and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you enjoyed it. Until next video stream, bye bye.